This is the fourth of our Wednesday events where we take one of Big Change's Hopes for Education and we discuss it in detail. So Big Change published a manifesto back in January, sort of December 2019, January 2020. And it's looking at the future of education, and there's 10 sort of big hopes, key hopes that they would like to see change in education over the next decade. And this is the fourth one, and this evening we are looking at how we can create schools and environments where every child can fall in love with learning and keep on learning for life. So that's very much the focus of this evening's event. For those of you that are new, just a bit of information about Heads Up. So my name is James Pope. I'm the founder of Heads Up. And in the room, we have lots of people who are in the Heads Up community and some people who are not, and you are very welcome if you are not. So Heads Up has been running for about 18 months. It was originally designed and set up and founded to provide support for head teachers, to help them to manage the stresses and challenges and pressures of being a head teacher, and to create spaces where head teachers could join with peers, connect with them, and share some of those pressures and stresses with peers. Ordinarily, we run 2 support sessions a week, one on a Wednesday night and one on a Saturday morning. It's an incredibly friendly network, it's an incredibly kind network, and it's an incredibly informal network. So we actively encourage people to bring a drink along on a Wednesday night for a support session, and we actively encourage people to bring coffee and tea on a Saturday morning. But it is a place that we have created intentionally to be a space where head teachers can be their authentic selves, and they can share the challenges, and they can get support from other people in the room. We are a network for head teachers past, present and future. So a number of people in the network are people who have been head teachers and are no longer head teachers. And they bring their experience and their wisdom and their skill to the table. And we have a large number of people in the network who are currently serving head teachers, and we have people in the network who have ambitions to be head teachers in the future. So although we're called Heads Up for Head Teachers, we're very much dealing with the spectrum of leaders within our school communities. And the support sessions are normally to create a safe space where people can be their authentic selves. We don't share the details of who's been in the room. We don't share screenshots. It's up to people if they want to share that they are in the Heads Up network and they're getting support from the Heads Up network. That's entirely up to individuals. However, on these Wednesday events, which we run every other Wednesday, we take a different approach because we're celebrating the great work that people do in education, but we're looking very much through that future lens of what the education system in England could become and what schools in that education could become, and hopefully providing some inspiration for leaders of schools. So we record these sessions and we'll be putting that out on our YouTube channel. We may also take, as happens every week or every 2 weeks when we run these sessions, I'm sure that one of you, 2 of you, or possibly all of you will say something massively inspiring and inspirational. We might take a little bit of a video clip of that and post it up on our social media channels. And we would encourage you to follow those and take a look at them. So we do record the session, and we may well share screenshots of who's in the room. So that's enough, definitely enough of me rabbiting on, and hopefully that provides enough context for everybody in the room. We would absolutely encourage you, it is an informal space, we do have presenters this evening, but we want to hear from you and we want to hear what you think. And that's really, really important to us in our Heads Up sessions, but it's definitely important in this session. So we would actively be encouraging you to jump on the chat, to share your thoughts on the chat in response to what anybody said, to celebrate anything that anybody's said, or to challenge it if you feel like challenging it or offering a different perspective. That is all absolutely fine. We are really excited this evening in line with the theme. So every child can fall in love with learning and keep on learning for life. I'm pretty certain that there's not a person in the room who would not share that ambition. That we have a school system where that applies to every child and every learner. And to help us explore that, we've got 2 sort of inspirational inputs. So we have Andy Wood joining us from the Green School, which is not yet open in South Africa, but is about to open and is part of the Green School International movement. And Andy's going to share some of the values and the principles and the context for how those green schools are set up. And Andy's going to kick our event off. And then later on, we're really delighted alongside Andy to have Paulina and Serdar here. Paulina and Serdar, if you could give everybody a wave. They are here. They are co-CEOs of Hopes4Ed, and they provide incredibly inspiring learning resources, learning platform, and really moving sort of content for schools to engage with and to assist with the process of learning. And they're going to share their journey, and they're going to share some of the resources with you and show you what Lifter is all about. But all of the time, we want you to be thinking about how does what we hear from Andy, how do what we hear from Paulina and Serdar, how do they help us to create that environment where every child can fall in love with learning and keep on learning for life. And it would be really easy, wouldn't it, in an event like this, especially in the current context, to get dragged down into a conversation about assessments and learning, and that really narrow, reductive focus that we see in our education system. But we're going to shove all of that to one side, because we're not about that. And we're going to really focus on the business of learning and learning that has real meaning for all of our young people. And that is now definitely enough of me talking. So I'm going to drop out of the picture. I am going to hand over to Andy. Andy, thank you for joining us. It is 9 p.m. in South Africa, everybody. We're really grateful that Andy has made the time and space to join us. He's got a really lovely looking glass of red wine with him, which has made me very jealous. So Andy, I'm going to hand over to you, and really excited and interested to hear about the Green School and the movement in South Africa.
Well, James and fellow heads, thanks so much for inviting me. Here in South Africa, we hold British education in very high regard. So I feel quite almost out of my depth talking to such a group of people as yourselves. So just thank you so much for having me. And perhaps just a little bit about our story. I'm founder head of a new school being established not far from Cape Town in the middle of the Cape Winelands, an extraordinarily beautiful part of the world. But it's a once in a career opportunity to found a school. And I'm sure many of you, have been through sort of strategic planning sessions and vision sessions and have come up with really wonderful ideas of where you wish to take your school. But somewhere between Ofsted, examinations, governing bodies, the school unions, many of those things just slow down and slow down and slow down. And in fact, substantial change is very, very difficult to create, particularly if you've taken over the headship of a well-established school. And so starting a new school, you have a blank canvas. Should we have uniforms? Should we have rules? What sport should we play? What should be in the curriculum? It's an absolutely wonderful opportunity. And so I'm just really excited to be given this opportunity. I'll talk a little bit about what Green School is internationally, then a little bit about the history of the school. I might drop in a little bit about my educational background, some of the challenges we faced along the way, and then would love to just invite any questions and suggestions from you. We're very much finding our way. So a little bit about Green School. Green School was first established in Bali by John and Cynthia Hardy. They were very successful business people there. And John and Cynthia watched Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, and felt profoundly that they had to do something to make a difference, and felt that education was the key. And so founded this school, Green School Bali, had absolutely no educational background at all. Met a number of educators who read a fair bit of Alan Wagstaff's research and John Hattie's research on visible learning, and those were perhaps the cornerstones of that. They gathered around them just a very eclectic group of people, the kind of teachers who end up in Bali, and they were really creative, off-the-wall, different educators who've created an extraordinary school. Can I share screens? Would it be possible? So there's just some pictures of my school, but I just want to show you firstly, Green School in Bali. There we go. So Green School in Bali is made entirely of bamboo. None of the classrooms have walls. Everybody goes around barefoot. And so when you arrive there, the first thing that strikes you is when you meet the principal is wearing shorts and has no shoes on. And education hasn't fallen apart yet, but it's just a wonderfully fresh approach to teaching and learning. The energy of the school is quite different. Because the classrooms have no walls, there's just an extraordinary freedom and a very relaxed approach to teaching and learning there. And as one looks at the research, I think something like 70% of children are bored in school all the time. And well over 50% are depressed at some stage of their lives. And many go on to boring and depressing jobs later in life too. And so as we ask ourselves, well, what kind of education do we wish to provide, and what kind of children do we want to produce at the end of that education journey? Well, we want confident, principled, resilient, kind, selfless young people. So Green School set about saying, well, how do we establish a community of learners focused on making a sustainable world? And that is really at the heart of the school's vision and mission. So that was 2008. They started with 85 students, and the school has grown and grown and grown. Today, well, a year ago, there were 550 students. The ban on travel has reduced those numbers a little, but it certainly is a really successful, vibrant school, together with a green camp that operates with it, a cool connection, a local bursary and scholarship scheme. It really is an extraordinary school. The campus architecture alone attracts about 1,200 visitors to the school annually. So it really is just a very, very interesting and innovative school. But it has gathered around itself just people who are looking for something alternate in education and have the freedom to be able to put that in place. In 2017, a South African family, Alba and Herman Brunt, went over to Bali, took their 3 daughters with them, enrolled them in Green School to have a Green School experience. And the children absolutely loved it. It was just inspirational. And when they returned to South Africa, because they do have jobs and careers and life has to carry on, decided they had to establish Green School South Africa. And so it really is born of one family's passion to establish a school here in South Africa. And I'm just going to show you some photographs of our sort of school's location. That's what the school looks like today. But perhaps that photograph shows you there, surrounded by the Cape Winelands. We're busy building a campus. And if you were there today, there were literally just hundreds of workers and electricians and plumbers and tilers and pavers and just all sorts of contractors on site as we prepare for an opening on February the 15th. But it's located in the Cape Winelands, I said, probably 60 kilometers from Cape Town. And we've got 8 hectares of land, so plenty of space. That's our sports field. This will be our hall, our admin block, which we call the Hive, kindergarten, primary and middle school. That's our heart of school building, which has the music, art, library, science lab, the kitchen, and then these beautiful grounds. And you can see they've just been planted. But the idea is that we've got a forest of fruit trees for the middle of the school. And there will be citrus and apples and stone fruits and tropical fruits. There'll be vegetable gardens and fruit and flower gardens and medicinal gardens. We want the children to be involved in growing the vegetables and taking to the kitchen and preparing lunch and all the wonderful learning opportunities that happen as you have such an out of the classroom learning experience. So perhaps close to International Baccalaureate, PYP or Montessori principles, we want the children's natural curiosity to drive learning. So if you were to say teach radius and diameter mathematics, well, we'd go out there, we'd look for all the circles in the school, we'd find a tractor tire, a dustbin and a pizza, we'd take lots of measurements, and from the inquiry outside of the classroom, that would drive the learning journey to our outcomes. We have very low profile on testing. Yes, there is assessment, but certainly not marks or grades and very high profile assessment driven learning, but a real focus on just evidencing learning in a positive, warm, affirming sort of way. It's an extraordinary physical landscape. So I've just had some art render of what the school is going to look like. That will be our hall. This will be the entrance to the school as you arrive. And all the buildings built to living building standards. So really exacting environmental standards, and the living building standards inform us of just what can the carbon footprint of each of the materials of the school be. We need to think really, really carefully about where we're going to source all our cleaning materials, how we recycle things. We need to be able to generate more solar power on campus than we use. How effectively can we recycle our water? And to ensure that all of those are part of the learning experience of the school. So all our solar panels will have a great big display on the side of the building. The children will be able to see how many volts and watts and amps of power are generated. We'll be able to see just how much power have we saved, how are we using, are we really off the grid, to what extent can you be off the grid. and similarly with our water recycling and so on, to just create a whole range of wonderful learning opportunities that would enable children to be aware that each of their decisions has an impact on the environment. They can be a force for positive change. They can be a force for good. So the campus is really very, very thoughtfully and carefully designed. For example, the plaster has no cement in it. It's all lime and clay and sand with a mixture that you'd probably find in most historic buildings. But the craft of that has long since disappeared. Every element has been very, very thoughtfully put together to ensure that we've got this beautifully harmonious design. Quite different to the bamboo of Bali, because we do have very hot, dry summers. Today was close to 40 degrees. In the middle of winter, it gets down to about 7 or 8. But certainly, so we need enclosed buildings, but wanting to have lots of glass, lots of light coming into the classrooms, and a sense that even when you're indoors, you are outdoors. So that's what our school looks like today. We aim to have our classrooms finished in ready for the school to open, and the admin block and the hall probably ready by March or April. We've had a wonderful opportunity to have all our teachers on board, and they joined us on the 1st of October, and we've been running an onboarding process. So we had some of the Green School International people come and join us, and to run a teachers training workshop. So how wonderful to have all your teachers for 3 months, and to say, right, in your suitcase, what do you need to unpack? What do you need to pack in? What are your mindsets that you need to say goodbye to? What's good and valuable about where you are? And really to get everybody very excited about the vision and mission. And just reflecting on that process, I think it started very, very well, but 3 months is quite a long time. And I think our teachers are now just anxious to get into the classroom and get started. They want to teach, they want to get going now. So sustaining that momentum has been challenging, and certainly there were ups and downs, but without doubt it was really, really worthwhile to get that pioneering team together and get everybody on board with a strong vision of where the school is going to be. Interesting question about what do you need in your suitcase, and if there's some time, I'd love to share with you about what you need for a green school journey. An interesting dimension of the school is that our language and cultural landscape here in South Africa is very complex. As you know, we're a country with a history of apartheid, and post-democracy. There's been an ever-growing awareness of the inequality gap. And for a complex number of social and economic circumstances, the gap between rich and poor continues to grow, despite lots of government policies, lots of economic policies. That continues to be a reality. And so a school like ours, which is privately funded and reliant on school fees as a sole source of income, there are no government subsidies. How do we remain relevant in our context? How do we reach a wider audience? How do we seek about bridging that divide? And certainly a number of very searching questions asked of us, often on social media in quite an aggressive sort of way, but they're valid questions about ensuring, how does the school remain relevant? How do we recruit a diversity of students and teachers? And what does diversity look like? Is it racial diversity, religious diversity, political diversity, diversity of perspectives? And so we are very thoughtfully engaging with each of those issues. And that certainly will be an ongoing discussion, and it needs to be a very well constructed discussion, thoughtfully engaged with, as we look to frame the identity of the school in our local context. And it does look different in Bali, and it does look different in New Zealand, and it would be different in Mexico, or certainly the United Kingdom. But certainly we're being asked searching questions by people as they look at the establishment of the school. Establishing a new school, for those of you who might be interested in doing this, is certainly a wonderful opportunity, because you get to learn about building design. What does a sewage plant look like? What should the electrics be like? You get asked lots of questions about the Wi-Fi network, and plumbing, and access, and health and safety. So you need to be a jack of all trades, and to gather around you a team of people. But there's just a wonderful opportunity to be involved in all sorts of aspects of the design, the furnishings of the classroom. Should we have smart boards or blackboards or television? Should we be technology zealots or cynics? and so we've just had a fantastic range of discussions around about sort of just some fundamental issues. You know, what technology do you buy for your school? And you're well aware that that will certainly strongly affect the quality of teaching and learning, the style of teaching and learning. And so it's been wonderful to have a number of those discussions. And I won't go into the detail of those, but they certainly have been really valuable. I just see some questions popping up in the chat room. And I wonder if I could perhaps just go through these and see if I can pick up on some of them for you.
Please do, Andy. Pop in there. Oh, is somebody challenging me to open a sustainable school with an ethical curriculum? That's so my bad.
And those are lofty ideals to put on your website, and good to be challenged to see, well, how are you meeting them? Yeah, ethical curriculum is best, and we are having lengthy discussions about, you know, how do we ensure that our curriculum is sustainable, not only environmental sustainability, but social sustainability, economic sustainability, and how do we design student learning projects that would look at a range of those sustainability issues in our local context. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals form a strong framework for us to plan our thematics. Yeah, certainly a question about hiring teachers, and without doubt, finding people who are aligned to your mission is far more important than qualifications and experience. And so we've been fortunate to have recruited a really very committed group of teachers who are certainly on board. And it's very interesting, the recruiting process, because you interview people and you look at their curriculum and their CV and background, but a lot of it is that X factor. Do they love children? Are they going to be fun teachers? Will they bring energy? Are they resilient? Because in a new school, you are the photocopy repair person.
Are we allowed to ask a question, or do we have to type the question in?
Fire away. I'd love this.
We'll go around the room, Alison, as usual. We'll open the room up in a second to some questions, my love.
Okay.
Okay.
So just saying, it takes a particular kind of teacher to join a new school where you will be the photocopy repair person. You are coaching sport, you are designing the curriculum, you're doing your complete curriculum map, you're designing an extracurricular program, you're in charge of assemblies. We've got teams of teachers working on what cleaning products should we buy. And they've got to go out and, what whiteboard markers can we use? And what do you do with an old whiteboard marker? And how do you source them? Should we be using chalk and blackboards? Because those things just wore down and you wipe them away. And a whole team of people looking at that. Factor in COVID and COVID protocols. Does COVID trump sustainability? Can we use bleach as a sanitizer? What do we wipe our desks down with? So lots of teams of teachers looking at these questions. No simple answers, but we're trying to be as ethical as we can in sourcing sustainable cleaning materials and to ensure that our COVID protocols are both safe and as environmentally sensitive as possible. I'm well aware that a good class should not be the teacher talking all the time, but that the participants ought to be asking questions. So please fire away.
Andy, that's fantastic. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of things that you said there, because recently we did a Hopes4Ed a couple of weeks ago that was all to do with assessment and testing. And we asked the question whether we were in the UK education system testing and measuring the right things. And many of us felt that the national curriculum is quite restrictive. And interestingly enough, we had a Heads Up member in the audience a couple of weeks ago from South Africa, and she described the national curriculum as archaic. And I think that's something a lot of us really struggle with, that we're delivering a curriculum that we feel is really out of date and needs transformation. So it's interesting to hear about how holistic your curriculum is and how you're doing project-based learning to get the academic side in, but also to focus on nurturing those values of compassion and resilience and ethical thinking. It sounds like you're really nurturing global-minded citizens in your schools.
That's very much at the heart of what we're seeking to do. I think in education, we tend to measure the stuff that's easy to measure. Mathematics tests and science tests and so on. But how do you measure ethical decision making? How do you measure creativity? How do you measure entrepreneurship? Can you think in systems? Are you adaptable? Are you able to advocate a particular cause? And those things are far less definable, but they will determine your success at school, at tertiary study, and beyond. So how do we bring those qualities front and center in our curriculum and celebrate that learning? And we are so concerned about putting numbers and values, and that creates such a fearfulness. As I interview potential students for the school, their number one concern is the stress around tests and examinations. And am I going to fail? Am I going to fall short? How do I perform? And if you can take that stress away and replace it with a rich curriculum, wanting to, and an assessment framework that says, show us what you know. Now, it might be a TED talk, it might be a poster, it might be an app, a PowerPoint presentation, but demonstrate your learning. So yes, we'll have English essays marked, and yes, we'll have science experiments, and yes, there'll be some spelling tests, but there will be a range of assessment frameworks. But parents will not get marks at the end of the year. And that sends shivers down the spine of the local education authority, because if there are no marks and scores, well, what's going on there? But I can show a very well-researched curriculum and a very thoroughly constructed assessment philosophy and framework.
Yeah, we have a bit of an obsession with testing here in the UK, unfortunately, and alongside it is a mental health crisis for young people and a really toxic accountability system for head teachers as well, which is really the foundations of why Heads Up came about, actually. So, yeah. Let's have a look in the chat. Does anyone want to raise their hand and ask a question for Andy or share something? TJ, you've usually got a lot to say, my love. What are you thinking?
I mean, I liked Kelly's question, actually, but I mean, I asked a little bit earlier about kind of, obviously, if we have a diverse curriculum, like, I think like the question, especially when I'm challenging like head teachers and stuff in my podcast, I think that one of the things that kind of, because I think it's so important to find the kids' niche and what they're really good at, right? But ultimately, the argument that I get back is, but it's we shouldn't be restricting them on only the subjects that they're good, which I'm not saying, right? But I mean, how can we kind of like make sure we find the kids' niche without kind of making it too narrow in terms of the curriculum and still keeping it diverse?
So how our curriculum's divided into sort of three major areas: proficiencies, which would be language, mathematics, and science; thematics, which would be an integrated approach. Think of it as a unit of inquiry in the International Baccalaureate language; and then a passion project. And that could be anything: designing a mountain bike, getting involved with the local orphanage, the Cape Leopard project, pick whatever you like. We hope that in the course of their years through school, children will try a number of those. Now, get to the end of grade 12, they'll be able to tell a university admissions registrar, well, I started a business and it failed. I created an app, it sold for $1 million. I got involved with an orphanage and a choir. I helped with the donkey shelter. But I've discovered that I'm really passionate about being a game ranger in Botswana. Now, many other children might have got very good marks in mathematics and got a good accounting degree and enjoyed an accounting firm and thought, this is really boring. I want to be a game ranger in Botswana. If they were really brave, they would have done it then. So let our children early on in their lives discover, what is my purpose? And ultimately, that is a spiritual question. And if you can align your purpose with how you choose your career, you will be fulfilled wherever you are. And that might lead to a much wider range of career choices than many parents might first have thought of. But the most important thing is that their children have a clear sense of their purpose and are able to follow that passion.
Can I just ask, sorry, what did you say you split? What were the three names that you split into?
Proficiencies, which would be your essentially core subjects: languages, mathematics, and science. Your thematics, so in International Baccalaureate language, those will be a unit of inquiry, and then a passion project.
Just using that terminology is so powerful, isn't it? I need to introduce you to someone. He's called Gavin Williamson. I don't know whether you've heard of him. I think he could learn a thing or two. I can't imagine him using the vocabulary passion projects. Kelly, you had a lovely question, darling.
Sorry, just to explain, you could probably tell by the accent, I'm not an English resident. I'm from Wales, okay, which is sort of adjoined next to England. But we have gone through over the last 4 years a transformation of the curriculum, and we are, you know, we are working towards aligning ourselves to this competency-based curriculum as opposed to just skills and knowledge. So we've got the 4 purposes, and it's very much aligned to what you've said around the global learning goals, etc. But one of the hurdles that we've come across is how can we ensure we know in our hearts that developing a bespoke curriculum centred on the needs of the learners is the right approach. But what we're finding is how do we actually ensure consistency between schools if we're using this variable approach? And I just posed a note in the chat that this, we know, we're not trying to make learners sort of know and do now. We're trying to develop what we want learners to become. And that's where it needs to be a whole system transformational change, doesn't it? It is, you know, the curriculum is one part of it. The accountability needs to match what we're trying to shape and know what is the best for our learners. So that was my question. I've rambled on a bit, but it was around like consistency between schools to make sure that that learner entitlement is, you know, valid and fair across the board without losing sight of what we know is best for the learners as well. So it's just a little bit around how you think we can promote consistency, really.
I think it would be a massive challenge to do that on a national level, where you've got so many schools and different schools, different school leaders, governing bodies, constituencies, and ensuring that consistency would be very difficult, because this approach is so much driven by the passion of the governing body and the school leaders, and the buy-in from your senior staff and your school community. So I think it works very effectively at a school level, but I think to raise it to a national level would be a far more daunting challenge. Because as you'll know, one of the most difficult things to change is how a teacher teaches in the classroom. So how do you get school leaders who are very comfortable in the way in which they're doing things to look afresh at how they're leading their schools?
Thanks, Andy. Has anyone else got a question? Shona, welcome. So I'm just going, you're a new face, Shona, welcome. You're a head teacher?
I'm the principal of a small rural academy in the southwest, Castle Carey in Somerset. I'm really interested, actually. I wonder whether trying to get consistency is the enemy of actually trying to give an entitlement to learning, and that's where we're going wrong in our education system. I've been really reflecting on our obsessions with trying to do that in assessment, and that maybe if as school leaders we thought about, if it was just me and the child trying to work out what that child could do and giving them something to leave with, whether we wouldn't get a lot further than if we worry about whether I'm saying the same thing as the person in the school down the road. And so I wonder whether consistency is the problem, not the solution.
Mm.
Can I come in there, Kate?
I beg your pardon?
Like, it's Patrick here. Can you hear me?
Oh, hello, Patrick. Yes, I can hear you.
I mean, I might look a little dark. I'm in a car park. My dad's having his COVID jab right now, so I'm in the car park outside. Jump in and join and listen. It was really interesting to listen. Not the school I'm in at the moment, because we've not got to that stage yet, but the previous 2 sets of schools I've gone into, the language is great, and I love in the language. We introduced to North Liverpool Academy and the UTC and Studio, you've got more freedoms in those schools, but we introduced from Key Stage 4 our passion projects and pathways. They were the 2. So it's competency based lower school, but those pathways and the freedom it gave you to do what you want to do was wonderful. And actually it was liberating for the teachers, but not just for teachers, for support staff, because what we found is other staff had, you know, members of support staff had their passions as well, and we hooked up the kids with passions, the staff with passions. We had kids doing beekeeping and all sorts of things. And actually in that North Liverpool Academy, for example, over that 2-year period before I arrived, and we changed it and flipped it, we had 11% of our students got into Russell Group universities. At the end of the first year of doing this, just for the sixth form with the pathways and that following the passion, those enrichments, up to 20 plus. We're now up to, as I left there in September, 30% or 32% I think it was, into Russell Group, including our first Oxbridge. So it can actually just liberate children and move people forward, but also staff. So we worry too much about what Ofsted are going to say. Ofsted come in and see these things. They love the idea of passion, as long as students have got an entitlement within there as well. So I think I agree with the comment around consistency can stifle things, and it's about that's more about conformity, and it's not about that. If consistently you're driving towards that values-based vision and drive your curriculum towards it, I think we can be individual. So I'd agree completely with what I've just heard.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
A particular context here in South Africa, and we talk a lot about equity and equality. And equality is treating everyone the same. But equity is giving different groups of people different levels of support to ensure that they have the same access to opportunity.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so
Giving people what they need.
A consistent approach. So a child from a very disadvantaged home in a township would need considerably more support than somebody from a home that has books and a television set and poetry lying around the house. And so I think at the heart of what you're saying is the difference between equity and equality.
Yes.
Thanks, Andy. Alison, darling, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, and it's nice to hear you talking, Andy. I'm a fellow South African, so I understand the dynamics really, really well. My question is, I was quite interested in what you talked when you were talking about the makeup of the pupils at the school and the fact that it is a private school and all of those sorts of things. And then, of course, talking about the children doing a personalised project. And it's really important for the children to understand the country that they live in really, really well. So what my question is, I'd quite like you to describe your staffing makeup, because that will impact directly on the way in which the children understand the world. So what does your senior team look like?
So we have really struggled to attract a range of racially diverse staff.
Why?
Because firstly, people applying for private schools tend to come from a particular demographic. People who've, there's a relatively small number of good Black matriculants choosing teaching as a career. There's a perception that jobs in business are much better paid. So people, particularly from Black communities, are not choosing teaching as a career. So very few graduates coming out of teacher training college are Black. There's a lot of schools competing for those students, those teachers. And once they're in teaching for a couple of years, the much better paid jobs in industry attract them away. So we're attracting to...
But that would work for white people as well. So I'm just really interested in knowing what your senior team looks like.
Yeah, so my senior team are predominantly of the same demographic, white and female.
So what's the message to the Black students?
Well, the message of Black students is we are actively looking to recruit people from diverse backgrounds, and that is a significant challenge for us. And we're working on it, but there are no simple solutions, and we are having to be, we cannot just sit back and wait for people to apply. We have to go
Okay,
out.
but the thing is, I do understand South African. Most of my family are teachers, so I know that there are teachers out there who are Black and who are talented and who are passionate. And my worry is that if you're going to be developing a curriculum in the way that you've talked about, which is not dissimilar to what I was talking about last week in my presentation in the schools that I set up, which was very much about personalised learning and about enabling pupils to become the best global citizens possible. But if you have a group, if the children learn through the curriculum, but they also learn through what they see. And if what they're seeing is a white leadership team, the message is that the whites go on being the leaders. And for me, that is something that I find really, really difficult. I'll say up front, absolutely difficult to cope with. And so the education the children are receiving is that you going on allowing the divide to continue, so I think that the hidden curriculum is through your staff instruction. And a couple of weeks ago we had an amazing speaker come on who talked about his leadership journey, and he said very, very clearly to all of us that if you have a when you have your staff instructor, what do you want your pupils to see? So the children aren't seeing you actively doing recruitment, because children don't see that side of it. They see who's in front of them every single day, who's leading, who's got voice, who's been listened to, who really belongs, whether the black staff in your school are having to fit in, or whether they truly belong. Because then that's going to enable the black children to be successful and to truly belong. So as long as you've got a senior team who are all white, then everyone else fits in rather than truly belongs, and that holds the black children back significantly, in my view. And I'm sorry that comes across as really, really challenging, but as someone who's brought up as an apartheid child, and who saw the worst of South Africa and who had to leave under very, very difficult circumstances, this is really close to my heart. And I want things to be better, and I want things to, I want to be part of the change. I want to enable it. So yes, my question is really, really challenging to you, but thank you for hearing me.
Alison, the points you make are absolutely valid. I agree completely with you. And the challenge for us is to go and find those people. And what we found as we've advertised is we just haven't attracted those applicants. We've been out to search, but clearly our network hasn't extended far enough, and we need to extend that network further. And we are actively doing that. We have a number of strategies in place to engage with education leaders, universities, to be able to find, identify and attract quality applicants who are diverse, not only in terms of race, but language, political background, religious views, identity.
Okay, well, what I can do is say that if you want to have a conversation, if you'd like me to be part of the journey in any kind of way, I'm offering things open-heartedly. So whether it's whether it's sharing what I've learned being a head teacher in this country, or whether it's about just connecting in a different kind of way, it's an open-hearted offer.
Well, Alison, thank you very much. We just need to stop emails.
Sure.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you, Alison. Thank you so much. We're doing a lot of work here in the UK at the moment on diverse representation in schools. It's something that the community feel really strongly about, and it's good to hear how you're going to tackle that one, Andy. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Andy? You're quiet tonight. I think you're all on dry January. I don't know what's wrong with you.
Well,
Ashley, what are you on?
But it's been lovely to meet you.
Not.
I look forward to connecting with you in the future, and I'd love to join this group of people. You look a really fascinating group of leaders, and I'm sure there's a lot I can learn from you, and I'd love to just strengthen the network, and people like Alison to be able to form connections which might really lead to wonderful opportunities.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think the green schools are going to leave an absolutely incredible legacy. Hands up who wants to work in a green school, because that's something I would definitely like to do. Thank you so much, darling.
Can I just add some advice quickly to Andy just before he goes? Andy, I mean, you should definitely jump on LinkedIn. I think you'll find that you will definitely reach out to more people if you build a network on there. Because I've just tried to LinkedIn you and I couldn't find you. So maybe that's some advice.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. Fantastic. So next I would like to, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Two of the most kindest and compassionate educators I know, Serda and Paulina from Lifter, are going to share what they do with their award-winning platform and how they engage their children in a love of learning for life. So Paulina or Serda, shall I hand over to you?
Thank you, Kate. We talked about how to do this today, and we thought we'd try and introduce each other.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Go ahead.
I'd like to introduce Paulina Turbo, who I met 17 years ago on our master's degree in documentary filmmaking. What I always found fascinating about Paulina is her curiosity and her desire to explore and learn, to go beyond the familiar. She inspired me from the very moment I heard her speak. And we began working together at university and basically haven't stopped. Today, we're the co-CEOs of Lifter, where we have combined our passions for storytelling, for exploration, for learning, and for human understanding. And actually, I've got an anecdote which I wasn't planning to share. Has Andy left? Has Andy left us?
I'm still here.
Paulina and I have been to South Africa a number of times over the last few years. And unfortunately, one of the most memorable experiences I've had in South Africa was negative, and I don't think it was intentionally negative. And I just want to share it with you because I think it's relevant to all the stuff we've been talking about. So we went to a wonderful restaurant with Paulina called the Waterkloof. I'm sure you know it if you live in the Cape region, and we had the most amazing service. And roughly half of the people who served us were black and half of them were white. And they were all impeccably professional, impeccably welcoming, and really complemented the wonderful level of quality of the food that we had with their service. Paulina and I, being documentary filmmakers, being inquisitive, being all the things that I just said we were, starting to wonder a couple of courses in. And I'm a former waiter. Sorry, Paulina, I know I'm going off piste completely from the beginning. We started to wonder if the people serving us had ever tasted the food that we were eating. And being documentary filmmakers and very good at talking to people and asking questions very politely, very respectfully, we asked all 7 of the members of staff who were serving us if they'd ever tasted the food that they were serving us. And 4 of them were white and 3 of them were black. And the white waiters all said yes, of course. And we all have. One of them said, we all have. Of course, we all have. But unfortunately, none of the black members of staff had tasted any of the food. And I say this, and I don't believe that the proprietors of the restaurant intended this, right? I believe that they intended for everyone to taste the food. And having worked in a restaurant myself, knowing when the food tastings were happening, they were happening before the shift. You know, people would come in early. There might be a bit of camaraderie before the shift starts. But it's actually delving into and to understand people's lives, their contexts, and everything about them before they get to the workplace, which is important for us to be able to make that workplace inclusive. And I'm not for a moment saying that you're not doing this at Green School. I'm a big fan of what I've seen of Green School, but I just wanted to share that experience because it was a hugely poignant one for Paulina and I. And as co-CEOs ourselves, we found it incredibly difficult to find people of color and people and women, particularly for our development team. You know, we're talking about computer programmers, coders. These are white men. And we've had to go the extra 10 miles to actively seek some diversity in that team. And we haven't been fully successful. We're on that journey. And in that sense, I empathize with you. And I really hope that you can make progress. And next time we look, there'll be some more diversity in the Green School teaching community.
And just to pick up on that, one of the things I've identified is that I cannot just hope that graduates from university will apply to my school. We need to work with grade 10 and 11 students to encourage them to choose teaching as a career, to support them through their studies, and then to encourage them into my school. You know, we need to start planting acorns.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I hope it doesn't seem like we've just sort of attacked you because you've just shared a really inspiring story. So Paulina, I've introduced Paulina and I'm going to ask her a question. Paulina, tell me a bit more about your background and motivation for your work.
Motivation. Hi, everyone. I guess it sort of stems from the fact that my family was one when I was growing up that loved to travel. Both my parents loved to travel, and I had family living in different countries. My aunt now lives in South Africa, but lived in many different African countries. So I visited her when I was growing up, and I have other family in other countries. And I think having those experiences early on in my life made me really curious about people and made me love to meet new people. I also studied journalism, and I was when I was young, I was always questioning why newspapers chose to portray certain groups of people in certain ways, and sometimes entire countries in a very stereotypical, very narrow way. Whereas on my travels, I had seen the reality of how people live and what countries are like. So that kind of gave me the fuel to do something about it. And I went to study documentary filmmaking. And I wanted to amplify voices from around the world that are not necessarily heard in our mainstream media. So that was really the passion that got me into this line of work, into documentary filmmaking and into education. That's me. Now I'd like to introduce Serdar, who you already heard from. He's also my husband, and he's a very talented filmmaker who's very passionate about connecting with people from all walks of life. He's interested in understanding new cultures and is always looking for the common ground. And when before Lyfta, when we were making films, he was always seeking out to portray older people in his fictional films. So he always cast people, you know, above the age of 60 or 70. And to this day, he still has many relationships with those actors. And I just love that about him. He was always thinking about representation. Can you tell me a bit more about your background, Serdar, and what motivates you?
Nearly made the mistake of speaking while muted. Well, thank you, Paulina. As someone who was born into two cultures, I've always had a desire to learn about and understand people's lives and stories and cultures, as well as talk about and educate about my own. And I remember when I was 12, we lived in Canning Town in East London. And one day, my mum and dad are both teachers, but one day my mum was off school for some reason, and she said, "Oh, you know what? You can invite your friends down for lunch today if you like." So 3 friends and I went back to my house, and we had lunch. And she cooked a sort of traditional Turkish or Cypriot lentil soup. And one of my friends was absolutely fascinated. He was like, "That is the nicest thing I've ever eaten in my life," and he just couldn't stop talking about it. It made me really proud that my friends had sort of experienced a little bit of my culture, and it was pleasant and positive. My mum and dad have always been influential in my life. They're both Cypriot by origin. They're both retired primary school teachers. Both were born in Cyprus and emigrated to the UK. My mum was first. She came here on her own when she was 16. She was incredibly driven. She did her A-levels, went on to become the first person in her family to go to university. My dad emigrated a bit later and was unfortunately in Cyprus in 1974 when there was armed conflict between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. And his story in particular has had an effect, I think, on the way I see things. And my dad was captured by Greek Cypriot soldiers. He was in a prisoner of war camp for 3 months, over 3 months. And that had a profound effect on him, a deep effect. It scarred him. But I love the way he sort of responded to that traumatic experience. And not long after that, he moved to England. And in 1980, I was born. We initially lived in East London, like I said. And then in 1994, we moved from East London to North London, to a place where I can see we have Zena among us, and Zena will know Winchmore Hill, Palmer's Green area very well. And she'll know it well because it's home to lots of Greek and Turkish Cypriot families. Now, at that stage in my life, I'd never met a Greek Cypriot. I only knew, I'd heard about Greek Cypriots. I'd heard about the war, the conflict. I was afraid of Greek Cypriots, actually. And my dad, knowing that we'd be going to school with lots of Greek Cypriots, basically sat us down and said, "Look, you're gonna have Greek Cypriots in your class, and I want you to actively find Greek Cypriot children and make friends with them." And being Cypriot, he didn't stop there. Then we had to invite them to our house for dinner, because that's what you do when you're friends. You invite people to your house for dinner. And he literally forced us to make friends with Greek Cypriot kids, and we did. And I'm thankful for it. I've got one of my best friends is a Greek Cypriot woman. She's one of the godmothers of our child, and she's enriched me. And I think that experience of my dad's sort of outlook has had an effect on the way I see things. and the importance of understanding other people's narratives was so obvious to me, and the importance of representation, and that there is more to us, our stories, our families, our cultures, than is represented in the media, particularly in the mainstream media. And this is something that Paulina and I were aligned on from the very outset, and I think that's what sort of helped us join forces. Paulina, I'd like to hand back to you.
Yeah, I want to get to where we are now a little bit, and it all started 16 years ago in a small village in the north of Ethiopia in the Amhara region. It's a community based on egalitarian values. It's called Auramba, and it's a place where it's a small place. 500 people approximately live there. Women and men are treated equally. They work side by side. They share jobs based on ability, not based on gender. And they share all kinds of household tasks. It's a social enterprise. People work together and they invest heavily in education and elderly care as well. And just to say that diversity and inclusion is really at the heart of their philosophy. So when we first heard about this place, actually stumbled upon it on a trip, it was really captivating, and we got very, very involved with the story and have been following it for years and years and years. That relationship grew into what we call an interactive documentary. So being documentary storytellers, it was a beautiful story to tell. It was what we've never seen in any mainstream newspapers. And we started to experiment with, rather than telling a story in a linear film, how can we make something engaging and fun and use technology, use design, use filmmaking, and bring them together to create an experience of this amazing place. And that's where our journey started, really, towards Lyfta and what we do today. You're muted, sir.
Damn it, I had to do it once, didn't I? So as Paulina said, our initial instinct was, wow, amazing, positive, inspiring story that we'd never seen before. Let's make a documentary about it. That evolved into, as we got to know the community, as technology developed, as our expertise in short form storytelling developed, we asked ourselves, how might we make the documentary experience more immersive and more experiential? And spearheaded by Paulina, we said, let's make an interactive documentary. And we set out to make this. And when we were trying to fund it, nobody would fund it because they didn't know what it was. So we literally had to make it happen from our own desire. We had to make it happen by saving up, going to Ethiopia when we could, and working with the community to build something together rather than just pointing a camera at the community and making something about them. And it took us a number of years to complete our first version of what we call an immersive interactive documentary. And we were delighted when we finished it. We were invited to show it in lots of different film festivals. We premiered it in a really big auditorium in Oslo. It was a sellout crowd. There was wine, there was chatter. The Guardian featured some of it. And then we started being invited to educational institutions to show it. So, and the educational institutions that were inviting us were Cambridge, LSE, University of the Arts, Sussex. The Nobel Peace Centre invited us for a couple of meetings. I'm not saying this to brag, there's a point to this. And we were delighted because we were, this was our sort of audience. The Guardian reading folk of the world. The Guardian featured some of the story. And then my dad looked at what we'd made, and his first question was, have you shown this to children? And we were like, well, some teenagers saw it at the film festival in Norway, but it's not really designed for kids, Dad, with all due respect. This is for Guardian readers. And he said, I think you should show this to kids. This is a man with, at that time, nearly 40 years of primary teaching experience. So we took him seriously, and he introduced us to some of his former colleagues, and we met Lisa Tanner. And Lisa Tanner was at the time working at Pearson. She's a former head teacher. She was working at Pearson as a global learning consultant, and Harriet Marshall, who's on the call, will know Lisa as well. And Lisa, when she saw what we'd made, she said, this is the best global learning resource I've ever seen in my life. You must take this into schools. And so we were very excited by that. We tried it in a school in Ipswich with 7 to 10-year-old children. we planned 2 sessions, 2 45-minute sessions with a 15-minute break in the middle. None of the children went on the break because they were so engaged with what we were doing. They were exploring, they were learning, they were watching. And we planned 10 questions at the end with Paulina and Tina, our co-founder, to really try and understand what the children were able to understand, what they were able to process, and what they were able to articulate about their experience. And their response was so overwhelmingly amazing that we were literally just looking at each other every time a child answered a question, just thinking, how is that child 7 or 8 or 9? And when we looked over at their teacher to see her response, she was in tears. These were her children, and yet she was completely blown away by their response to this. And Michelle said to us afterwards, I want this in my classroom. How much is it? What it, you know? And at that stage, we didn't have a price. We didn't have anything. We were just like, this is an interactive documentary. And that was also the day that we thought, you know what, this is our new audience, teachers and children. And I think the lifelong learning thing that was in the brief here, you know, this is something that we had made for the audience that we knew, right? The audience, an audience of Guardian readers. But actually here were 7-year-olds really engaging with it in a way that we couldn't possibly imagine. And with that, I'd like to hand to Paulina to give us a short demo.
Okay, let me do that. And I need to share my screen. So let's see how that goes. Yes.
While you do that, I should probably explain that it's evolved quite a lot since the interactive documentary.
Can everybody see my screen? Okay, it's saying yes. Okay, cool. I'm just going to give you a very short demo. This will be short because I realized that we're probably out of time here. So this is what the Lifter Learning Platform looks like. So all these experiences led us to creating more stories from different countries around the world, as well as learning resources for teachers so that this can be used in the classroom and now even remotely. What I'm going to do first is just show you our search. So I'm just going to click this away from there. So on the Lifter platform, you can search by skills, values, themes, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this is the sort of pedagogy that we follow. It's all about, but we see it's a real life stories is all about learning skills and values, and also linking it to the UN SDGs. I'm going to be selecting here. One of the skills and values that people often like to search is about resilience. So I'm going to hit that one. And as well as resilience, I'm going to choose perspective taking, another really key core sort of skill that we see a lot of teachers using. That then narrows my search further, so it's sort of starting to show less hits on the interface. And then I'm going to go to the UN SDGs. I'm going to choose SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. Now, if I click on Story Worlds, that brings up 3 items, and I'm going to go into one item here, which is in the Aramba village that we told you about earlier, and it's the Visitors Center. So this is how you discover the content. And I'm just going to take you quickly to show you what it looked like for students. So I'm going to hit View Story World here. We have basically a student experience and a teacher dashboard. There are 2 separate browser-based platforms. So this is a student experience. And that brings you to the Aramba village. I'm just going to mute so that you can hear me speak as well. And everything we do in Lifta is always based on a 360 interactive image. So it's all about kind of discovering different places, homes, workplaces, different environments where people live and where people work and do things around the world. And here we are in the Aramba village. On the image, you can see different colorful labels. Clicking on those will bring you into short documentary films and multimedia articles, infographics, anything that provides sort of social or cultural context to the place or the people that we're meeting here. So that's the kind of core experience in the Lyfta student interface. I can also navigate back to a globe, and here is the Lyfta globe, and our big vision is to fill this globe with lots of pins that are in different countries to tell the stories of people from every single country in the world. You can go on a boat, the last trawler boat in San Francisco, where you'll meet the fisherman and fisherwoman who work together, explore their lives, explore their stories. You can equally meet an inner city beekeeper in Germany, in Berlin, who has decided that he wants to leave his career in coding and become a beekeeper. So these are just different environments that we offer for learning. So you can meet people in their real life environments. Going back to the teacher interface, I'm going to go from student back to teacher. Here we are. So basically, Lyfta allows you to, experience the stories of real people from around the world, but it also allows teachers to link the stories to teaching. So we offer lesson plans. And so, for instance, in this story world, you can find lessons that are ready-made for teachers. The lessons can also be made by teachers themselves, or you can modify one of our lesson plans for your own use. Just to show you, I'll just click on this one. It's called Entrepreneurship and Sustainability. So this is a 45-minute lesson. This particular one was designed for Key Stage 2 learners, but as I said, it could be easily edited to suit other learners as well, different ages. This is what a lesson plan looks like. It's connected to the story content in the story worlds. And I'm now going to show you what it looks like when a teacher has chosen to teach it to a class of students. I'm going to hit teach here and then just select the class that has been already set up. And now what you're going to see is how the story is woven into a teaching experience and what it looks like for a student when they log into a lesson. I'm going to open that lesson again. And this time I'm going into this lesson on the student interface. So the teacher can actually follow the lesson as well on their own device, as well as launch it to the students. Just going to mute that again. So here we are, you see the globe again, but now there's only one pin on the globe, because our lesson is focused on our Amba, and what you see here on the interface on the right-hand side is a quest tracker. So this is a way for students to follow the lesson that's been set out to them by their teacher. So they can just click and start their exploration of the Lyfta story worlds. So it's basically kind of a guided lesson that can be done independently, be it at home or in the classroom, on a device. Some students obviously share devices if they don't have their own device, but this can be done on your own or in a shared way. And that brings me to the end of the demo, because we're going to watch one of the films, which I think is going to be really great to see, because it shows the kind of stories that we have on a platform. So I'm going to stop this here and give it over to Serdar, and very happy to answer any questions later on. And Serdar will tell you more about how to get access to the platform.
Thank you, Paulina. Can you actually go into the visitor center on your?
Yeah, I can do that. And
let's start on your screen. So if you go in, and I would like people to look at your screen, and if you could just close the quest tracker down.
Yeah.
And just gently spin around the room. And what I'd like people to do is have a look at the imagery in the room. Normally, I'd ask you to listen to this on your own computers, but it won't sound so nice coming through Paulina's speaker. And just consider. So first thing we always try and encourage is for teachers and students to slow down and look around a space and observe and take a moment to see the details. And I just want an input from one or two people. What can we see in this space, and what might be happening in this space? Paulina, if you can carry on going around.
Yeah.
What might be happening in this space? Is there anyone who'd like to unmute themselves, jump out, and give us a suggestion? There are no wrong answers because it's.
I would
They're
say
having a community talk. They're discussing something around the community.
That's a really good possibility. Is there someone else who'd like to contribute?
I'd say it looks very democratic. Looks very sort of shared and non-hierarchical.
Really, really lovely observations. Now, if we had a bit more time, we would all get a turn, and then we would find out what's happening. I'm just going to reveal. Actually, this is the visitor centre. The man with the green hat is one of the he's the main founder of the community. Inanne with the red scarf is one of the main tour guides. The man in the t-shirt is a sort of external tour guide, and everyone else is a tourist. They have travelled for 3 days by bus to get to Aura from very far away because they've heard about this place that's pulled itself out of poverty. They've heard about this place that's managed to sort of succeed against the odds, and they've come here to find out why and how. So that explains a little bit of the context. And then if we had this on our own computers, we'd click the icon above Inanne and we watched a movie. Now the movie's only 3.5 minutes long, so I'm going to share a link which will take you directly to that movie. And I'm going to share it in the chat. And I think you should be able to watch it even if you're not on a computer, which makes it more inclusive than the platform itself.
You can also screen share this. I mean,
okay.
Want me to?
Yeah, I'll do that. So if you could go on to the link I provided in the chat, it's lifter.com/heads up. And I'll just share my screen. Thank you, Paulina. How do I do that? Share screen. And you should come to this web page. And all I'd like you to do is click the video, maximize the screen, turn sort of zoom, take the zoom window away, and take 3.5 minutes to watch this. But as you watch it, I'm going to stop talking in a second. I'd like you to consider two things. What can we learn from this story? And what can we teach with it in our own contexts? What can we learn from this story and what can we teach with it in our own contexts? And I'd like you to look through the lens of skills, values, attitudes, and competencies, or 21st century skills. What can we learn from this story and what can we teach with it? And let's reconvene in 3.5 minutes to discuss. And if you finish, just please pop just a few words into the chat while we give our colleagues who haven't managed to finish just a couple more seconds to finish. Thank you very much for your contributions. I would love to hear. I've noticed that there are actually a lot of familiar faces in here now. It's lovely to see you all again. Shona, I haven't seen you for ages. Really nice to see you again. Ben, really good to see you again after so long. So what can we learn from this story and what can we teach with it? And I'd love to hear from someone who I've never spoken to before. Or someone who I haven't spoken to for a long time. And I'd love you to unmute yourselves, actually, rather than just typing.
Serdar, can I say something?
Yes, please, Alison.
Hi. It's fantastic. It's every time I see a film from you guys, I always think, oh God, that's the best one. And then I see another one and it's just like, oh my God, that's the best one. What I really liked about this film is that it challenges the perceptions we have of African women. So yeah, you have a woman telling the story. Well, it actually challenges the perceptions that we have of Africa. And so what we're looking at is entrepreneurship. We're looking at women leading. We're looking at self-sufficiency. We're looking at the importance they place on values and the fact that they'll turn down aid so that they can maintain their identity and values. And I just thought it was unbelievably powerful. So thank you.
And that's really lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much. What can we teach with this? What can we teach with it in our own contexts? Mark, I'd love to hear from you. I don't know if you I haven't seen your face. I don't know if you've got a camera or not. Sorry to put you on the spot, Mark.
That's all right. I don't know if you remember me, but you
I do,
came
of course
to
I
my
do.
school.
That's why I'm
Yeah.
picking on you.
Yeah, you came to my school a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, we could teach. I think there's so much you can teach. I mean, from even from a very superficial sort of just cultural understanding through videos of seeing places that you'd never be able to potentially visit from a school perspective. To from what Alison was just saying about sort of entrepreneurship and models of self-sustainability, responsibility, about the collective versus the individual. I think there are so many links to school curriculum, in terms of without thinking about discrete subjects, although we can think in terms of discrete subjects too. It has real links to clearly geography. It has real links to PSHE, etc.
If I could just jump in there, Serdar. What I was developing an interest in learning for sustainability about a year ago, and I was looking at a number of things to do with it. And on a very simple level, which is me all over, I was concerned that people didn't seem to be getting past, without underplaying it, the sort of environmental angle on sustainability. What Andy taught me earlier was about how that can be a good basis for other aspects of sustainability. But I'm very excited by what I've seen tonight of what you've produced, and that film sums it up really, in the sense that collective experience within a community led them to great things. And to me, that's such a vital part of the whole concept of sustainability, about cooperation and about the collective and the power of your communities. And it is something that I feel we've lost in this country to a large degree, and is why we're in the pickle we're in now, and why perhaps even on a tiny little level, Sleepy Joe's speech to this afternoon, about bringing the US together, was quite humbling, really, because you see that small village in Ethiopia, and what the Americans and we could learn from that is incredible. And so I'm really grateful it's a real breakthrough for me tonight to see all that. So I think that potential there in that little clip is just amazing.
Thank you very much. And actually, it's important not to take all of the credit for this with Paulina, although that one we did make and we're very proud of. Paulina, can you explain how we've tried to diversify the voices on Lifter, just so that we get that done?
Yeah, very briefly. We work with filmmakers around the world. So we, having worked in the film industry ourselves before, we have big networks, and we've reached out to those networks, and we now collaborate. So we really reach out to filmmakers who tell local stories about their communities and their neighborhoods around the world. And right now we have a call for films called Neighborhood Docs to really try and reach out to regions where we don't have that much coverage yet. So Africa being one, Southeast Asia, Australia, and South America. So actually for you as well, just to know if you have any, if you know any brilliant filmmaker storytellers from any of these regions, you can tell them that, you know, we're here to actually collaborate, and we commission and we buy material from around the world.
I think we've far outstayed our welcome in terms of how long we were supposed to speak. Sorry, Kate.
You haven't at all. I think we're all mesmerised by the platform. I just think it's incredible. I used this when I was a head teacher, as you know, and I just felt head over heels for it. And every time I see that our Amber story, and I have my favourite stories on the platform, I fall in love again. I just think it's incredible. And I think that we need this now more than ever. Somebody put in the chat that, you know, oh, this will be great for field trips. Yeah, absolutely. But I just think that Lifter goes so much deeper than that as well in terms of exploring values. And, you know, you're amongst a values-led community here. So I know that everybody will see the worth of the platform, and I'm blown away. I just think it's incredible every time I see it. So thank you so much, both of you. You are two of the most generous people I know, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us this evening. Does anyone have any questions or challenges for Serda and Paulina before we wrap up our session this evening? There's some really lovely things in the chat, guys. You must check it out. I think just you know, bring it back to the focus for this evening, which is every child can fall in love with learning and keep on learning for life. And we've had two fantastic examples of schools and platforms that are doing that for us at the moment, and it's needed now more than ever. Ben, you've got your hand up.
Oh, it's a big hand as well, isn't it? It's right in front of the screen. Apologies for that. I'm gonna kind of cheat slightly and focus on the lifelong learning aspect of that, and raise a question about the potential for a platform like this for adult learning, in particular for school leaders, because, you know, instinctively school leaders will always focus on children's learning and prioritizing that. And of course, strikes me watching that there's considerable scope for a platform like this to be of great use in, if you like, kind of broadening the horizons of leadership learning, teacher professional development as well. And I was interested in kind of the group's thoughts as they were watching that. I'm making an assumption, and I'm sure I'm not going to be proven wrong. As you were watching that, actually, what you were feeling you might learn from a platform like that as well yourselves as school leaders.
Can I just say that as someone who, prior to leaving my last school, I've introduced Lifter to that school, but this was one of my favourite stories. But there was one story about a cemetery in Pakistan. That was a Jewish cemetery in Pakistan, and I was like, "There's a Jewish cemetery in Pakistan? Oh." And how this caretaker of this cemetery looks at his whole family for generations have looked after this cemetery. Sorry, it actually makes me feel quite emotional. I learned so much through this platform, and for me, the importance of bringing this, not just, like you say, not just for the children, but for the adults who teach children in schools, for any adult in the world, is just transformational. And I said to my husband, you know, did you know about this cemetery? Did you? And he was like, no, that's actually amazing. And I think what I love about what Lifter do is how they find stories from unexpected places where you find those similarities and those differences, those commonalities. And at the end of the day, we're all kind of human, but there's parts of this world that I will never see in a million years. And so what I loved about Lifter while I was using it in my previous school was learning with the children that I was teaching. So sometimes I would let them just say, right, tell me where we're going today. You know, right, it's where in the world do you want to go? And we would learn together. And I think it's wonderful. Honestly, I absolutely love this platform.
We honestly don't pay these people. I'm just want to say.
You don't. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I wanted to thank Andy, but I think he's dropped off the call. But it's, you know, it's late in South Africa. It's later than they're 2 hours ahead of us. Guys, thank you so much. That was incredible. It's time to wrap it up now, actually. But thank you all so much for turning out on Hump Day, and I wish you much strength for the rest of the week. You're all doing a fabulous job. Tough times, but you are just an incredible bunch. So resilient. My love goes out to you. Thank you, and see you Saturday, some of you, and see you next week for the rest of you.
Hey, can I say one thing?
Of course you can.
I know a lot of people here will be from state-funded schools. We're delighted to say that the Connecting Classrooms for Global Learning program has got an extension specifically to support schools with remote learning, and they've made additional funding available for things like Lifter. So if you'd like to try it, and it comes with training and 3 months access, with no obligation to buy. Obviously, we want you to buy it, but there's no obligation to buy. If you'd like to try it in your schools, please get in touch. I'll just put a link here, and it's literally all you need to do is sign up for the webinar, take the webinar, and then you have access for 3 months. Yeah, so I'll just put the link there in case anyone is interested in that.
Thank you, darling. That was the best freebie I ever had as a head teacher. Thank you. I'll send out some information to the network tomorrow, so that will be in your inboxes then. But thanks ever so much, everyone. We'll see you soon. Take care.